Are you interested in shaking things up? Are you a little bit bored with the same old tropes in every RPG? Well, if that's the case, you might be interested in Disgaea 7. I've been playing it for a while, so let's talk about it. I'm Nima, here with NGC Gaming. Please give us a like and subscribe, it really helps the channel grow, and I would personally really appreciate it. Anyway, into Disgaea 7. This is a series that stays the same, yet doesn't become redundant. It's very interesting the way that you can play these games and none of them become over repetitive. You know, think of like Far Cry or Assassin's Creed, where there is a point where you're just kind of tired of doing the same thing over and over, and you start to feel like they're almost telling the same story over and over. But that's not the case with the Disgaea series. Yeah, gameplay is pretty much the same. It's a strategy RPG. Characters a lot of times look the same. Yeah, honestly, I think that speaks volumes of the storytelling and the writing when you have a situation where they almost use the same assets, it's the same combat system, but the games feel different. They do always add something new, some different mechanic, some different mode that really does shake things up. And as a newcomer to the series, it can be a tad overwhelming when you first enter your base and you see all of these different shops, all these different modes, all these different things that you can interact with at some point in the game. Although series vets will feel right at home, and trust me, it doesn't take that long to get used to these things and to explore them. They are just a lot of times different shops or different things that you can do that are really fun and they shake things up. But as I said before, it's the writing, it's the storytelling that really just shapes these games into something different. And Disgaea 7 is no different. You see, this game follows two main characters, a girl named Piralika and a demon boy by the name of Fuji. Now, Piralika comes from a very wealthy family, and most of the entire voyage is financed by her. As she's traveling to Hinamato, fall in love with this region's culture, yet most of her references come from things like comic books and very old, outdated material, as opposed to how it really is now. You see, they used to live by the Bushido Code, a very honorable, noble code. And now that this place is overran by demonic forces, it's now become quite the opposite. And when she arrives in Hinamato, she expects something completely different. She actually upsets some local residents who have turned to violence to make things right. Luckily for her, a demon boy by the name of Fuji steps in and helps her out. Fuji is very much a classic demon, if you will, as he hates admiration, does not do anything out of the good of his heart, and yet he does see a situation where he could become wealthy. He's now stumbled upon a very rich girl that needs a tour guide, if you will. The first thing that she offers him is an incredibly rare sword. And see, there's only like 7 of these weapons. These weapons are godly and worth their weight in gold, I'm sure. And once Fuji signs a contract saying that he will take the sword as a down payment on his $1 billion reward, he notices before the ink's even dry, things change really quickly. His lost rich little girl is less about sightseeing and more about collecting more of those weapons that she just gave him. And they sit with the shogun, prominent families from years and years past who are now more elevated in government power than they are warriors. But nevertheless, these weapons are going to be very difficult to get a hold of, but he's already sold himself to a rich little girl, so he has no choice. Kind of makes you wonder which one's the real demon there. But that's really where the story takes off, and you're able to track down all these weapons and get into just a ton of different battles. A lot of fun, and while we're looking at the combat itself, it is a strategy turn-based RPG, much like every other game in the series, without a lot of difference, I would say, between any of the other ones. Now, the only thing that I will say is, where this one does lack a little bit of actual strategy, meaning like a lot of buffs or debuffs, this one really does have a much different aspect, as there's things like geodes that will control the entire playing field. They'll give buffs or debuffs to the entire field or to the entire area that a group is standing on. And you can tell because these are all color coded. Now you can destroy these geodes and that will actually change things up too, either by making the power more or less. You can actually destroy all of them to result in quite a buff for your team. Now, to be honest, I don't completely understand this mechanic, so I am explaining it, yet at the same time, if I'm wrong about something, no, I apologize. It's not the easiest to figure out, if I'm being honest. Like, I thought I had it figured out, and then I tried to do something and it actually backfired on me, so yeah. I can't say I fully understand it, but that's not the only thing about this game that changes things up. Now, one of the new aspects of the game, as far as I'm aware, is jumblification. And what this does is you're actually able to make your character become like 100 times bigger, and you're actually on the outside of the battlefield. You can make these gigantic giga attacks on the enemies below, and in most scenarios you need to do this because the enemy bosses usually jumblificated themselves, and so you have to do this just to fight that boss. And to top all of that off, Fuji also has something called Hell Mode, which gives him a gigantic buff and the enemies a debuff. This can only be done at certain times. The same thing with jumblification. They all rely on different gauges that you need to feel throughout the battle, and sometimes you just won't, and other times it happens like way at the end of the battle where it doesn't really matter. For sure though, Hell Mode is a tide turner, and one of those things that you want to use at the right time because it can just go away within an instant. It does though allow you access to skills that you wouldn't be able to use without Hell Mode, and these can be devastating. So for me, it's something I saved for the bosses or at the end of a battle. Now going back to basics, one thing that I would change, the only thing I really would change, is the fact that even though your characters survive a battle, it's not enough to make them level up. Your characters actually have to use their attacks, fight enemies, and use their skills. And that's something I had to remind myself a lot, to use skills, because that's one of those things, like as an old school RPG fan, I know that you want to save all of that. Like you just don't, it's all finite, right? And so you don't know when's the best time to use it, and usually you end up never using a lot of this stuff or massively underusing it. But not in this one. You want to use all of that. You see, I had this issue pretty early on in the game where Fuji was like level 12 and the rest of my characters were like level 2. And so when I was going into battles, they were just getting obliterated, and Fuji was pretty much the one standing victorious, which is fine, except for the fact that you want all your characters to level up because there's going to be a point when Fuji cannot handle every enemy himself. So I had to backtrack and do some grinding and make sure to kind of just keep him there as a bodyguard while the other ones attack. And early on, this was painful. And I say this because they would die, the other characters would die, and it actually cost quite a bit of money early on to revive them and to bring them back to health. So it was a little bit of a game I had to play. Now, this only took like maybe an hour, but I think it's something that you probably want to think about quite often, because if it could happen so quickly to get out of a line, that gap in character level could really potentially be a problem towards the end game. And so as I look at this game, and I think like graphically, I'm not going to talk that much about it because it pretty much holds true to the graphics of the last game and even of 5, but they're good. They're very detailed. You know, like we said, the assets are the same, but don't fix something that's not broken. And that is definitely what they did. They kept things the same because it was already good. It was already great. Honestly, it's what we wanted. And performance was fantastic. You know, it's one of those things where you don't look at performance as much in a strategy RPG because, well, frame rates and things like that can easily be kind of forgiven. You don't even really notice it in these type of games. And the biggest one more is glitches and crashes, and this game had 0 of those. So performance-wise, it's great. Soundtrack. Now, this one for me is also really important with this series, and I think fans are going to feel right at home with this soundtrack. And, you know, like usual, the voice acting is maybe a bit much. There's some criticism to it, but if I'm being honest, it works really well. Like, I'm glad they did it the way they did. It's a little bit hyperbolic, a little over the top, but that's what Disgaea is, and they really matched that and really put it over. So I have no problem with that either. If this was a more serious game, and I might say something, but no, it works really well with Disgaea. Ultimately, Disgaea 7 is a great game, and it's well worth your money. Looking at the, value-wise, as I just told you, when you start the game, you see a whole bunch of stuff. And that's just the start of the game. That's not even going through the actual battles, but there's just so many different modes, so many different options in the game. Things like proposing and passing bills amongst your own allies as you guys decide stuff. Like that sort of aspect of the game. Not to mention hiring and firing your recruits, going through different challenges. Like all of this is just like side stuff compared to the game itself, which is also rather lengthy. And I will say, I think that this is one of those games that is best played when you're only playing this game. Like, if you have other outside distractions or other games you're trying to play, you might feel like you're not getting very far in this one, just because of the gargantuan size of the content that's in there. So again, well worth your money, but I would definitely give a lot more of your attention to this one than to expect to split it up between other games. But that's just my thoughts on it, and as a person who plays multiple games, I myself really did feel like I didn't get as far as I wanted to in a game session. But I'm always playing like 4 other games, so it completely makes sense on my end. For me, this game is an easy 9.2 out of 10. It's amazing. I really enjoyed it. I love the Disgaea series. They always bring it. Like, there is not a bad Disgaea game. It may not be your cup of tea, but you can't say it's not a great series. And this is just another one in that series. But let me know what your thoughts are. Have you picked it up? Have you played it? Are you interested in it? Are you interested in the Disgaea series at all? Are you a newcomer to the Disgaea series, sort of like myself, who has really just jumped on that train within the last year or two? Anything and everything in the comment section are much appreciated. We got a lot of reviews coming out. I'm swimming in games, literally, so I appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate your support. Love y'all. Bye-bye.